The first and last human battalion. Commander Sarah Chen stood at the bridge of the HSS Defiant, trying not to feel small as massive alien warships glided past her vessel. Her ship, though considered huge by Earth standards, was barely the size of a coalition support craft. The year was 2157, and humanity had just joined the Galactic Coalition's war against the Nexar Empire. They'd sent their best, 800 soldiers in total, equipped with what Earth considered its finest military technology. The Coalition representatives hadn't even tried to hide their amusement during the initial inspection. Their energy marshal, a tall crystalline being named Vixthar, had actually laughed at their railguns and kinetic weapons. How quaint, they had said, to still use physical projectiles. Now, 3 weeks later, Sarah and her battalion were being sent on what everyone assumed was a suicide mission. The Nexar Empire had pushed deep into Coalition space, threatening a vital supply route. The Defiant and its sister ship, the HSS Courage, were assigned to defend it. Status report, Sarah called out, watching the tactical display where red dots representing Nexar ships grew larger by the minute. 5 Nexar warships approaching, Commander, Lieutenant Park replied from his station. Their energy shields are at maximum. Standard Coalition doctrine suggests we retreat and wait for reinforcements. Sarah smiled. She'd spent the last 3 weeks studying Nexar technology, and she'd noticed something interesting. Their shields were incredibly advanced, almost perfect at deflecting energy weapons, but they'd evolved in a society where physical projectiles were considered primitive, forgotten technology. Load the tungsten rods, she ordered, and get me the Courage on the line. The faces of her fellow officers showed confusion. The tungsten rods were simple weapons, just heavy metal cylinders fired at extremely high speeds. Against Earth ships, they were devastating. Against advanced alien shields, well, no one had ever tried. All stations, Sarah announced, prepare for combat. Enable electromagnetic warfare suites. I want every dirty trick we've got. Jamming, chaff, decoys, everything. The Nexar ships approached with perfect formation, their purple energy weapons charging. They probably expected a brief, civilized exchange of energy weapon fire before the primitive human ships retreated. They weren't ready for what happened next. The first tungsten rod struck the lead Nexar ship at 30,000 meters per second. Their energy shields, calibrated to stop plasma and laser fire, might as well have been tissue paper. The rod punched through their hull like it was butter, destroying their main reactor. The ship split in half, its crew exposed to vacuum before they could even register what had happened. All ships, fire at will. Sarah commanded, launch missiles and drones. The space around them erupted in chaos. The Defiant and Courage launched everything they had: physical projectiles, missiles, and swarms of small drones that confused Nexar targeting systems. Earth's primitive electromagnetic warfare systems played havoc with Nexar communications. Their perfect formation fell apart. 2 more Nexar ships were destroyed before they could adapt. A 4th managed to raise physical barriers but was crippled by missile fire. The 5th turned to retreat, only to run into a cloud of primitive space mines the human ships had dropped earlier. The battle lasted less than 15 minutes. When Coalition reinforcements arrived, expecting to find wreckage of the human ships, they instead discovered 5 destroyed or crippled Nexar warships and 2 triumphant human vessels with barely a scratch on them. The energy marshal's face was unreadable as they reviewed the battle footage. Sarah noticed their crystalline fingers trembling slightly as they watched the tungsten rod impacts again and again. Fascinating, they finally said. You used physical weapons because our enemies were expecting energy weapons. Simple, primitive. They paused. Terrifyingly effective. That night, the Coalition's High Command held an emergency meeting. The topic: just what had they let into their ranks by accepting these humans? It was only the beginning. The War Game Incident. Lieutenant James Rodriguez watched the alien observers' faces turn from confusion to horror as he explained his team's winning strategy. They sat in the debriefing room of the Coalition's special training station, where species from across the galaxy gathered to practice warfare in safe, simulated environments. "So you see," James said, pointing to the tactical display, "we vented our own atmosphere on purpose. When the enemy ships came to investigate our dead vessel, we struck." The Mithri observer, a tall being with iridescent scales, made a choking sound. "You deliberately exposed your crew to vacuum." "Only for 90 seconds, James shrugged. "We were all wearing suits. Standard human space combat training includes vacuum exposure drills." This was the 6th war game his team had won in 2 weeks. The Coalition had organized these exercises to help integrate human forces into their military after Commander Chen's surprising victory. Instead, they were discovering just how differently humans thought about combat. "But your own ship," the Mithri continued, "you damaged it intentionally. You risked your crew. This is not warfare. This is madness." James looked around the room at his human crew. They seemed confused by the aliens' reaction. To them, it was a simple tactic. Pretend to be dead. Strike when the enemy lets their guard down. They'd practiced similar strategies in Earth's oceans with submarines for over a century. The previous games had gone similarly. When faced with a superior force, James's team had hidden in a planet's radiation belt, using the dangerous conditions as cover. The aliens thought they were insane. When cornered by 3 enemy ships, they'd deliberately triggered a reactor overload warning, making the enemy retreat to a safe distance, then used that space to escape. The observers called it desperately reckless. Lieutenant Rodriguez, the head observer, a crystalline fix like the energy marshal, spoke carefully. "This is the 6th time your team has employed what we would consider self-destructive tactics. In every scenario, you choose strategies that put your own forces at risk." "With respect," James replied, "we choose strategies that work. In real combat, the only thing that matters is completing the mission and keeping as many of your people alive as possible. Everything else is just details." The observers huddled together, speaking quietly in their own languages. James caught words like unstable and unpredictable. He sighed. They still didn't understand. Another human team had won their game yesterday by hiding power down inside an asteroid, then detonating explosives to create a debris field that disabled the enemy sensors. The day before, a team had used their own damaged ships as improvised missiles. Every single human victory seemed to disturb the aliens more. The VIX observer finally turned back to James. "We have reviewed all human performances in these exercises. You consistently achieve victory through methods that no other species would consider. You treat your own ships, your own lives, as weapons to be expended." "We treat everything as a potential weapon," James corrected. "Ships, debris, radiation, vacuum. They're all just tools. That's how humans have always fought. We use whatever works." The room fell silent. James noticed several observers making subtle gestures he'd learned to recognize as signs of distress or fear. The VIX's crystalline form vibrated slightly, their version of a troubled sigh. "I must report these findings to Coalition High Command. Humanity's approach to warfare is concerning." As James left the debriefing room, he heard one observer whisper to another, "They're not just willing to die to win. They're willing to lose everything except the victory itself. How do you fight an enemy like that?" James smiled. They were asking the wrong question. The real question was, why would anyone want humans as enemies when they could have them as allies instead? The psychology report. Dr. Xalith's tentacles trembled as she sorted through the data on her screen. As the Coalition's leading genopsychologist, she had studied the warrior cultures of 17 different species. But humans were different. She stood before the Galactic Senate, her color-shifting skin betraying her nervousness as she prepared to present her findings. The vast chamber held representatives from over 50 species, all waiting to understand why these newcomers to galactic society were causing so much concern. "Honorable Senators," she began, her translator converting her musical language into standard galactic common, "my research into human military psychology has revealed disturbing patterns." The main screen behind her displayed scenes from Earth's history: ancient warriors with spears, tanks rolling across battlefields, nuclear explosions. Unlike the Nexar, who evolved as territorial predators, or the Mithri, who fight only to defend resources, humans developed warfare in a unique way. She changed the display to show Earth's various terrains. Their planet's diverse environments forced them to become adaptable. Too adaptable. She played a video of children playing with toys. "Look at this. Human children practice warfare through play. They take peaceful objects and imagine them as weapons. This behavior continues into adulthood." The screen showed a human farmer modifying their tractor into a makeshift armored vehicle. Murmurs spread through the Senate chamber. Several representatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. But most concerning is what humans call asymmetric warfare. Dr. Xaleth's skin flickered to a pale shade. When faced with a superior force, humans don't surrender. They don't retreat. Instead, they change the rules of combat itself. She displayed footage from Commander Chen's battle, where simple metal rods had destroyed advanced ships. Then Lieutenant Rodriguez's war games, showing tactics that seemed suicidal to alien eyes. Humans have a saying: necessity is the mother of invention. When they need a weapon, they create one. When they can't create one, they adapt something else. Their entire history is filled with examples of weaker forces defeating stronger ones through what they call innovation, but what we would consider madness. A Vic senator raised their crystalline form. Surely they understand the concept of honorable combat. Dr. Xaleth's skin turned nearly white. "That's just it, Senator. To humans, the only honor in warfare is protecting their people and achieving their objective. Everything else is." She checked her notes for the human phrase: fair game. She showed more images: human resistance fighters using household items as weapons, soldiers turning terrain itself into a weapon, civilian tools modify for combat. In human history, whenever someone created a new weapon or defense, humans would immediately begin looking for ways around it. They don't accept limitations. They don't follow expected patterns. Their strategic databases include concepts like thinking outside the box, deliberately ignoring normal solutions to find unexpected ones. The Senate chamber had grown very quiet. Dr. Xaleth displayed her final conclusions. Humans are not the strongest species, nor the most technologically advanced, but they are possibly the most dangerous because they are unpredictable. They turn weaknesses into strengths. They weaponize anything they can find. And most importantly, they never, ever stop trying to find new ways to win. She looked around the silent chamber. "My professional recommendation is that we must carefully consider humanity's role in galactic warfare. They don't just fight wars, they revolutionize them. Every human tactic we've seen so far is just the beginning. They will keep innovating, keep adapting, keep surprising us." As the senators began their heated discussion, Dr. Xaleth gathered her data. She had one final thought that she kept to herself. Perhaps the most frightening thing about humans wasn't their capacity for warfare. It was how easily they could teach their methods to others. The last straw. Major Diana Watson stared at the holographic display showing the approaching Nexar fleet. 12 massive warships were heading straight for New Haven Colony, where 30,000 civilian refugees had gathered. Her small force of 3 human ships was all that stood between them and slaughter. "Ma'am," her tactical officer reported, "coalition reinforcements are still 6 hours away. The Nexar will be here in 20 minutes. Diana's mind raced. They couldn't run. The civilians would die. They couldn't fight conventionally. They were hopelessly outnumbered. That left only one option, one that made her stomach turn. "Get me the colony administrator," she ordered. When the administrator's worried face appeared on screen, Diana asked, Your water purification system. It uses chlorine, right? Yes, but what does that? The administrator's eyes widened as he realized what she was suggesting. Major, you can't be serious. Those are your people down there. I need an answer. Yes or no? After a long pause, he nodded. Yes, we can help. Diana turned to her crew. Here's the plan. We're going to vent the colony's chlorine supplies into the atmosphere around the spaceport. When the Nexer land their ground forces, she didn't need to finish. Everyone knew what chlorine gas did to organic beings. But Major, her second-in-command, protested. That's a war crime. The Coalition banned chemical weapons centuries ago. The Coalition banned them in space combat. Diana corrected. There's nothing about using existing civilian chemicals for planetary defense. Sometimes the rules need to be creative. The next 15 minutes were a blur of activity. The colony's engineers, following Diana's instructions, rigged their purification system to release its chemicals on command. Diana's ships positioned themselves to look like they were preparing for a last-stand defense. The Nexer fleet arrived right on schedule. Their ships moved into position around the colony, ignoring the seemingly harmless human vessels. Just as Diana had predicted, they began landing ground forces. The Nexer preferred to capture colonies intact rather than bombard them from orbit. Now, Diana ordered. Chlorine gas filled the landing zones. The Nexer troops, whose environmental suits were designed for vacuum and radiation, but not chemical weapons, began falling immediately. Their commanders, watching in horror, pulled their forces back to their ships. But Diana wasn't finished. While the Nexer were distracted by the chaos on the ground, her ships launched their attack. They targeted the confused Nexer vessels with electromagnetic pulses and computer viruses, another tactic the Coalition considered uncivilized. 3 Nexer ships crashed. 4 more lost power. The remaining 5 retreated in disarray, leaving their ground forces behind. When it was over, Diana ordered her medical teams to treat the affected Nexer soldiers. Many survived, though they would never fight again. The colony was safe, but the cost had been high, not in lives, but in galactic law and morality. Hours later, she stood before a Coalition military tribunal. The judges, representing 7 different species, looked at her with a mixture of horror and fear. You turned a civilian water purification system into a weapon of mass destruction, one judge stated. You deliberately caused permanent harm to enemy combatants. You corrupted their ships' computers with viruses. I protected 30,000 civilians against a superior force. Diana replied calmly. Every weapon I used was already there. I just used them differently. That's exactly what terrifies us, another judge whispered. The next day, the Nexer Empire sent an urgent message to the Coalition. They were willing to discuss peace terms, but they had one non-negotiable condition. Humans must be banned from any future galactic conflicts. Looking at the fear in the judge's eyes, Diana knew they would agree. Humanity had proven too good at warfare, so good that even their enemies would rather make peace than face them again. The ban. The Great Hall of the Galactic Senate had never been so quiet. Representatives from over 200 species sat in tense silence as they reviewed the evidence before them. On their screens were 4 incidents that had changed galactic warfare forever. Commander Chen's primitive victory, Lieutenant Rodriguez's disturbing war games, Dr. Xalith's psychological analysis, and Major Watson's chemical warfare incident. High Chancellor Vexterra, the eldest of the Vix species, floated in the center of the chamber. Their crystalline form caught the light from 1,000 stars visible through the chamber's transparent dome. We face an unprecedented situation, the Chancellor began. For the first time in our history, we must ban a species from warfare, not because they are too violent, but because they are too innovative. Images played on the massive screens, human ships using simple metal rods to destroy advanced vessels, soldiers turning their own damaged ships into weapons, civilian water systems becoming chemical weapons. The Nexer Empire has offered permanent peace. The Chancellor continued, with one condition, that humans never again participate in galactic warfare. After reviewing all evidence, I support this condition. Not because humans are our enemies, but because they are too dangerous to be anyone's enemies or allies. Ambassador Sarah Chen, recently promoted from commander, stood at the podium. She was the only human present, representing Earth's interests. "You're afraid of us," she said simply, "not because we're stronger or more advanced, but because we think differently." "Precisely," the Chancellor replied. "In just 6 months, humanity has revolutionized our understanding of warfare. You turned civilian tools into weapons. You created strategies no other species would consider. You made the most powerful empire in the galaxy sue for peace rather than face you again." The Chancellor's form shifted, displaying patterns that translated to deep concern. "But most worryingly, you have begun teaching other species your methods. 3 coalition worlds have already started adapting human tactics. If this continues, the very nature of galactic warfare will change forever." Sarah smiled slightly. "Isn't that a good thing? Our methods saved lives. We ended a war that had been dragging on for years. At what cost?" The Chancellor's voice was soft. "You've shown us that anything can be a weapon, that any rule can be creatively reinterpreted, that no technology is truly off-limits. Where does it end?" The vote was quick and unanimous. The Human Containment Act passed into galactic law. Humanity was officially banned from participating in any interstellar military action. But there was a surprise addition to the law, one the Nexar hadn't requested. Earth was designated as a protected neutral world, guaranteed independence and safety by the entire galactic community. No species was allowed to threaten or attack human worlds. As Sarah left the chamber, a young Mithri senator stopped her. "Isn't it frustrating?" they asked. "Being banned from fighting." Sarah's smile widened. "Actually, it's perfect. We've achieved what every military really wants: peace through strength. Nobody will attack us because they're all too afraid of what we might do if pushed. And we didn't need a single advanced weapon to do it." The senator stared at her. "You humans planned this, didn't you? Everything from Commander Chen's first battle to Major Watson's last stand. It was all to show the galaxy exactly what humanity was capable of." Sarah just kept smiling. "I have no idea what you're talking about. We're just a simple, peaceful species now. It says so right in the law." As she walked away, the senator suddenly understood the most terrifying thing about humans. Even their peace strategies were weapons in disguise.